Could you endure being falsely accused, watching your integrity become your sentence, and still believe that everything has a purpose? How many of us do what's right, expecting a reward? But what if it never comes? What if justice seems blind, deaf, and mute? The silence of prison reveals more about us than the applause of freedom, because there, only who you truly are remains. Today, we'll uncover a Stoic message behind Joseph's unjust imprisonment. Stay until the end, because maybe, just maybe, you'll understand what this silence in your life is trying to say. And if this journey touches something inside you, subscribe. Here, every story is a mirror of the unseen. Egypt, a strange world, a land of stone gods, foreign customs, and a language he barely understood. Joseph never chose to be there. He was torn from his home while still young, sold by his own brothers, not out of open hatred, but silent envy of the dreams he carried, of the eyes that saw beyond, betrayed by his own flesh, thrown into a dry well, traded like merchandise. And yet, he didn't rebel, he didn't curse, he didn't lose his dignity. In the house of Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh, Joseph rose, through silence, through work, through loyalty. Everything he touched prospered because he was upright. Even while wounded, he turned exile into an altar, and service into an offering. Potiphar saw this, trusted him, gave him responsibilities. Soon, Joseph was managing everything. He was a foreigner, yes, but he was also noble inside. But the higher he rose, the more visible he became. And with that came danger, because Joseph was just, and for that, he became a target. Potiphar's wife saw him with different eyes, desire disguised as admiration, soft words, lingering glances, sly invitations. Joseph refused. Every time, day after day, she persisted, but he stood firm. How could I do such wickedness against God and my master? He said. Until one day she grabbed his cloak. He fled, but his clothes stayed in her hands, and with that, she twisted the truth, accused him of the very thing he resisted. No witnesses, no defense, no chance. The justice of men was swift and blind. Potiphar threw him into prison. No trial, no hearing, no doubt. And there, in the dark, Joseph sank even deeper, not for failing, but for remaining incorruptible. What does a man feel when he loses everything for doing what's right? The echo of the cell answered, nothing. Only silence. Injustice is a burden you can't see, but you carry it inside. Joseph, alone, no friends, no allies, no explanation. Life took everything from him except faith, except inner presence. In prison, he could have shut down, grown bitter, complained, but no, he chose to serve once again. The jailer noticed, gave him responsibilities, and once again he flourished. On the hard ground of injustice, he interpreted prisoners' dreams, comforted broken hearts. Saw hope in the midst of pain. He asked, remember me when you leave here. But he was forgotten, months, years, and still, he remained. No scream, no revolt, only presence, only service. He wasn't faithful because he wanted a promotion. He was faithful because that's who he was. He didn't do what was right for recognition. He did what was right because it was his nature. Joseph was wounded, slandered, ignored, but he wasn't defeated. Prison didn't steal his identity, it revealed his essence. He learned there's a silent strength in continuing to do good, even when no one sees. And that's a kind of victory the world doesn't applaud, but the wise recognize. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Epictetus was wounded but not broken, thrown into the depths but he didn't drown, walked in darkness but kept a light burning inside. As Epictetus would say, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond to what happens. He didn't control the eyes that envied him, nor the hands that sold him, nor the mouth that accused him. But there was one thing only he governed, his own mind, and that is the core of Stoicism. Joseph was a Stoic before the Stoics, not by philosophy, but by virtue. In his cell, he didn't lament, didn't demand immediate justice, didn't live for revenge. He lived and served, accepted reality, but didn't surrender to despair. That's the strength of someone who understood that the truest freedom isn't the absence of walls, but the presence of inner clarity. Seneca would write centuries later, adversity reveals genius, prosperity conceals it. When everything is fine, anyone seems strong, but it's in the abyss that the soul shows its stature. Joseph was shaped in the dark. While the world forgot him, He remembered who he was. While others labeled him a criminal, he remained a servant not of men, but of a clear conscience. The first victory is over yourself. Marcus Aurelius Joseph won. Before becoming governor, he conquered pride, anger, haste, and the need to prove anything to anyone. That's the virtue of endurance. Not a tense resistance, but a serene one. Not of pride, but of maturity. Like bamboo, bending in the wind, but not breaking in the storm. The true test of the soul isn't praise, but silence. Modern Ecclesiastes Joseph didn't need an audience or applause. He learned what the Stoics always taught. Life shouldn't be judged by its brightest moments, but by its longest silences. Imagine years in prison, no answers, no promises, no certainty of ever leaving, and yet he acted as if he were free. That's what Seneca would call the freedom no chains can take away. Joseph didn't play the victim, and that doesn't mean he didn't feel. It means he chose not to be defined by pain. Stoic virtue, like biblical virtue, isn't coldness. It's depth, it's feeling, and remaining it's suffering, and staying just, it's falling, and still being noble. When we can't change the circumstances, we're challenged to change ourselves. Viktor Frankl, echoing the ancients, Joseph embodied this. He didn't fight against the walls, he fought against despair, and he won. And you, are you living in your own invisible prison? Maybe there are no bars, but there are silences. There are weights that feel endless. There are doors that won't open, even when everything in you screams for movement. Maybe you tried to do what was right. Spoke the truth, were loyal, acted with integrity, and still, you were ignored, rejected, forgotten. Who betrayed you? And you still haven't forgiven. Who threw you into the pit, even when all you wanted was to be useful? How many times have you felt punished for being good? How many times has the world seemed to reward those who lie and silence those who serve? What if the silence around you isn't punishment, but training? What if this season where everything seems stagnant is actually the deep soil where your roots are growing? What if what hurts today is preparing you to carry something greater tomorrow? Joseph left prison to govern, but before he was placed over a nation, he had to learn to govern himself in secret. He had to learn what many avoid: waiting, serving in the dark, trusting amid doubt. Acting with virtue, even when no one sees. And you, what are you doing with your days of waiting? Are you using the silence to mature, or are you letting pain define your identity? Remember, sometimes life takes away the stage to teach us to speak with the soul. Sometimes being set aside is the universe's way of aligning us with what's essential. Maybe you don't need to leave the prison yet. Maybe you need to let go of the despair inside you, the hurry, the comparison, the resentment. Joseph wasn't saved from prison, he was transformed in it, and that made all the difference. Joseph didn't become a king in the palace, he became one in the silence of his cell, between cold walls and long nights. He learned what thrones can't teach: to rule himself. Waiting is a demanding teacher. It doesn't speak, it doesn't speak, it doesn't explain, it just watches. While Joseph was forgotten, God was remembering him. While men set him aside, heaven was positioning him not for revenge, but for purpose. Time didn't harden him, it matured him. His pain didn't embitter him, it refined him. He didn't get lost in the whys, he stood firm in the what for. Because some destinies can't be rushed. Some positions demand depth, not just skill. Joseph didn't leave prison with resentment, but with vision. He didn't leave seeking justice for himself, but salvation for many. He understood what he lived wasn't a delay, it was preparation. Some crowns only fit the heads of those who were trained in silence. We live in a world that rewards what's visible: likes, titles, applause. But Joseph was faithful in the unseen. He acted with nobility when no one was watching. He kept his integrity when no one applauded. He lived with purpose, even when the world treated him as disposable. And that is rare. Joseph didn't know he'd one day be remembered. He didn't know Pharaoh would call for him. He had no visible promise, no guarantee of a future, yet he kept going. Seneca wrote, "The great soul is one that stands firm in adversity, desiring no applause, fearing no man's opinion." That's the virtue of those who live to be, not to seem. How many of us only give our best when we're seen? How often do we quit, not from exhaustion, but from feeling unseen? But the Stoic and the wise don't act for recognition. They act from conviction, because true strength is the kind that keeps going in anonymity. even in silence, even in a cell. The wise man doesn't choose the easiest path. He honors the one given to him, even when that path leads through dark valleys, even when no one applauds, even when everything feels unfair. Joseph's prison wasn't a punishment, it was a mirror, a place where he saw himself without masks, without praise, without rewards. It was there, in the silence of his cell, that the nobility was born which would later lead an empire. Sometimes, it's in the place we least want to bet it, we most deeply become who we're meant to be. If this story touched something deep in you, consider following this channel. Here, every story is a silent compass, not to point you to easy paths, but to remind you of what truly matters. Virtue, presence, strength, without noise. See you in the next episode. And remember, man's justice may fail, the reward may be delayed, but virtue, that no one can steal from you, it's the only prison you'll never need to escape.